The receipt fluttered to the floor, landing face up on the polished tile. A single jagged line was drawn through the tip section. 0. A massive, insulting 0. The entire restaurant staff smirked as the billionaire walked out, leaving Sarah a struggling single mother with nothing but a dirty table to clean. Sarah felt the tears prick her eyes. She desperately needed that money for her son's heart medication. But as she angrily snatched up his dinner plate, something thin and white slipped out from underneath the cold porcelain. It wasn't cash. It was a handwritten note with 7 words that would change her life forever. And the man who left it. He wasn't just a difficult customer. He was a test that everyone else had failed. The dinner rush at Le Jardin, one of Seattle's most pretentious French restaurants, was less of a service and more of a battlefield. Sarah Miller wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smear the makeup she was required to wear. Her feet were throbbing inside her cheap, non-slip black shoes, a dull ache that shot up her calves with every step. She had been on her feet for 9 hours, and she still had 3 more to go. "Table 4 needs water, Sarah, move it," barked Mr. Henderson, the floor manager. Henderson was a short man with a Napoleon complex and a cheap cologne that smelled like burnt vanilla. He hated Sarah mostly because she couldn't afford to laugh at his bad jokes or stay late for unpaid cleanup. She had to run to catch the last bus to get to the babysitter. "On it, Mr. Henderson," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. She grabbed the silver water pitcher, the condensation cooling her burning palm. As she poured water for a couple who didn't even acknowledge her existence, Sarah's mind drifted to the crumpled envelope in her apron pocket. It was a final notice from the pharmacy. Her 5-year-old son Leo had severe asthma and a congenital heart defect. The new medication, the one the doctors said would stabilize him enough for surgery, wasn't fully covered by her meager insurance. She needed $400 by Friday. Today was Wednesday. She had made $40 in tips so far. Earth to Sarah. She snapped back to reality. Jessica, another waitress, was standing by the POS system, reapplying her lip gloss. Jessica was younger, prettier, and infinitely meaner. She made great tips because she flirted shamelessly with the businessmen and ignored the families with kids. "What is it, Jess?" Sarah asked, refilling a bread basket. "The VIP booth?" Jessica smirked, nodding toward the secluded corner table draped in velvet curtains. "Someone just sat down. Henderson says it's Ethan Sterling." Sarah froze. Everyone in the city knew the name Ethan Sterling. He was a tech mogul, a billionaire who had made his fortune in aggressive software acquisitions. He was known for 2 things, his brilliance and his absolute ruthlessness. The tabloids called him the Ice King of Seattle. "Why aren't you taking him?" Sarah asked, suspiciously. Jessica usually fought tooth and nail for the high rollers. A tip from a billionaire could be rent for a month. Jessica laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "Are you kidding? I served him last month at his charity gala. He's a nightmare. He sent back a steak 3 times because the sear lines were asymmetrical. He doesn't tip, Sarah. He lectures. I'm not dealing with his attitude tonight. I've got the table of drunk lawyers. They're easy money. You take the Ice King." Jessica shoved the menu into Sarah's hands and strutted away. Sarah looked at the corner booth. She didn't have a choice. If she refused a table, Henderson would fire her on the spot. And she couldn't lose this job, not with Leo's breathing getting worse every night. She took a deep breath, smoothed her apron, and walked toward the booth. Ethan Sterling was looking at his phone, his face illuminated by the blue light. He was handsome, in a severe, terrifying way. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in a year. His dark hair was perfectly coiffed, and his eyes, when he finally looked up at her, were the color of steel. They were cold, assessing. "Good evening, sir," Sarah said, forcing her most professional smile. "Welcome to Le Jardin. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with sparkling water?" He interrupted, his voice deep and devoid of warmth. "Room temperature, no ice, and a slice of lemon, but I want the rind removed. I don't want the bitterness of the oil in the water." Sarah blinked. "Certainly, sir. Room temperature sparkling water, lemon slice, no rind." And Sarah, "Yes, sir. Don't take too long. I have a conference call in 40 minutes, and I despise waiting." "I'll be right back," she said. She hurried to the bar. Her hands were shaking slightly as she sliced the lemon, carefully paring away the yellow rind until only the flesh remained. It was a ridiculous request, the kind of power play rich men used just to see if the staff would jump. But Sarah jumped. She had to. For Leo. When she returned, she placed the glass down on a coaster with practiced precision. Ethan Sterling didn't say thank you. He picked up the glass, examined the lemon slice against the light, and took a sip. He set the glass down. "Acceptable." Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Are you ready to order, Mr. Sterling?" "I am," he said, not looking at the menu. "I want the coq au vin, but tell the chef to substitute the pearl onions for shallots. I find pearl onions pedestrian, and I want the sauce reduced for an extra 5 minutes. It was too watery the last time I was here." Sarah hesitated. The chef, Monsieur Laroche, was known for throwing pans when customers tried to alter his recipes. "Sir, the chef is very particular about—" Sterling looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Do you want a tip, Sarah? Or do you want a complaint filed with your manager?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. "I will put the order in exactly as you requested, sir," Sarah whispered. She walked back to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She could feel Jessica watching her from across the room, a smug grin on her face. Jessica knew this would happen. She had set Sarah up to fail. The kitchen was a chaotic inferno of steam and shouting. When Sarah relayed the order to Chef Laroche, he turned a shade of purple that was genuinely alarming. "Shallots! Shallots!" he screamed, waving a ladle. "Who does this man think he is? He comes into my house and tells me how to cook. It's Ethan Sterling, chef," Sarah pleaded quietly. "Please, he's difficult. If we don't do it, he'll send it back, and Henderson will blame me." The chef swore in French, slamming a pan onto the burner. "Fine. But if he complains, it is too sweet, because of the shallots that is on his head, not mine." Sarah spent the next 20 minutes hovering near the pass, terrified that the food wouldn't come out in time. She checked on her other tables, refilling wines and clearing plates, but her focus was entirely on the corner booth. She saw Ethan Sterling checking his watch. He tapped his fingers on the table. Tap, tap, tap. Finally, the plate was ready. It looked perfect. The sauce was thick and glossy, the chicken tender. Sarah carried it out, balancing the hot plate on a napkin. "Your dinner, Mr. Sterling," she said, placing it before him. "Coq au vin, with shallots sauce, extra reduced." He didn't look at her. He picked up his fork and knife. Sarah stood back, waiting for the verdict. He took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. He put the fork down. "It's adequate," he said. "Is there anything else I can get you?" Sarah asked. "Yes," he said, finally looking at her. "Conversation." Sarah was taken aback. "Sir, "I'm eating alone," he said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. "And you look like you're about to collapse. Take a moment. Tell me, what is a woman like you doing in a place like this?" It was a trap. It had to be. Staff were strictly forbidden from fraternizing with guests. If Henderson saw her chatting, she'd be written up. I enjoy the service industry, sir," she lied. "Don't lie to me." Sterling snapped his voice sharp. "I can spot a lie a mile away. You hate it here. You hate the manager I saw, the way he looked at you. You hate the shoes you're wearing. So why are you here? Why do you endure the abuse?" Sarah looked around. Henderson was in the office. Jessica was busy with the lawyers. "I have a son," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The truth spilled out before she could stop it. "He's 5. His name is Leo. He's sick. Very sick. The insurance doesn't cover his new medication, and the rent in this city has gone up 20% in the last year. I work here because the tips are usually good, and I need every penny to keep him alive." She stopped, horrified. She had said too much. Customers didn't want to hear sob stories. They wanted to eat their expensive chicken in peace. Sterling stared at her. His expression didn't soften. If anything, he looked more critical. "So you're a charity case," he said coldly. Sarah felt like he had slapped her. "Excuse me, you're working hard, sure," Sterling said, picking up his wine glass. "But you're drowning. You think serving rich people food is going to save your son. You're relying on the kindness of strangers. That's a poor strategy, Sarah. In business, relying on luck is a guarantee of failure." Tears stung her eyes. The cruelty was unnecessary. She wasn't asking for a handout. She was working a double shift on a sprained ankle. "I am not relying on luck, sir," Sarah said, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "I am relying on my own 2 hands. I work 2 jobs. I sleep 4 hours a night. I do whatever it takes. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other tables to attend to." She turned and walked away before he could see the first tear fall. She hid in the server station for a full minute, breathing deeply, trying to compose herself. Don't cry. Don't let him win. Just get the check, get the tip, and go home to Leo. When she returned to the floor 10 minutes later, Ethan Sterling was gone. The table was empty. The plate was clean. She rushed over. The leather bill folder was sitting in the center of the table. She opened it, her heart hammering. The bill came to $185.50. Her eyes scanned down to the credit card receipt. Subtotal $185.50. Tip $0. Total $185.50. He had drawn a line through the tip section, a hard, dark line. Sarah stared at it. The room seemed to spin. 0. After the lemon rind, the shallots, the insults, the interrogation about her life, he left nothing. "Ouch!" Jessica's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to see her rival peering over her shoulder. "I told you, didn't I? The Ice King strikes again. 0 tip on a $200 tab. That's brutal even for him." He left nothing," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking. "That tip should have been at least $30. That was Leo's inhaler. That was groceries for 3 days. "Well, clear the table," Henderson shouted from the front of the house. "We have a walk-in party of 4 waiting. Move it, Miller." Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. She felt a mix of humiliation and pure white-hot rage. She wanted to scream. She wanted to chase Ethan Sterling into the parking lot and throw the receipt in his face. But she couldn't. She was just a waitress. He was a billionaire. She grabbed a bus tub and walked back to the table. She stacked the plate angrily. She grabbed the napkin he had used to wipe his mouth. And that's when she saw it. Under the charger plate, the large decorative plate that the dinner plate sat on, there was something white. It wasn't a napkin. It was a folded piece of thick, expensive stationery. Sarah frowned. She looked around to make sure no one was watching. She slipped the paper into her hand and unfolded it. It wasn't money. There was no cash hidden inside. It was just a note written in elegant, sharp cursive with a fountain pen. Sarah, you claim you will do whatever it takes. Prove it. Be at the Pier 59, shipping warehouse at midnight. Come alone. E.S. Sarah stared at the words. The ink was still fresh, glistening slightly under the dim restaurant lights. What is that? Jessica asked, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing. Nothing, Sarah said quickly, crumpling the note and shoving it into her apron pocket next to the final notice from the pharmacy. Just trash. He left trash. Typical, Jessica sneered. Clean it up. I need this table. Sarah finished clearing the table mechanically, but her mind was racing. Pier 59. At midnight, it sounded like the beginning of a horror movie. It was dangerous. It was insane. Ethan Sterling was a billionaire, but that didn't mean he was a good man. Why would he want her to go to a shipping warehouse in the middle of the night? But then she remembered his words. You're relying on the kindness of strangers. That's a poor strategy. And she remembered the $0 on the receipt. Maybe he was mocking her. Maybe he wanted to humiliate her further. Or maybe, just maybe, this was the strategy he was talking about. She touched her pocket. She felt the outline of the pharmacy bill. She thought of Leo's wheezing cough when she kissed him goodbye that morning. She checked the clock on the wall. It was 10:45 p.m. Her shift ended at 11 Uzuro. She had a choice to make. Go home, accept the defeat, and beg the pharmacist for an extension tomorrow. Or go to Pier 59 and see what the devil wanted. Sarah Miller untied her apron. She had never been a gambler. But for Leo, she would walk into hell itself. The Seattle waterfront at midnight was a different world than the polished interior of Le Jardin. The fog rolled in off the Puget Sound, thick and smelling of brine and diesel fuel. Sarah pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. She had taken 2 buses to get here, and the walk from the nearest stop had taken 20 minutes through a district of warehouses that looked abandoned and menacing. Pier 59 was a massive structure of corrugated metal and concrete. A single floodlight illuminated a side door. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked next to it, the engine idling silently. Sarah checked her phone. 11:58 p.m. I must be insane, she muttered to herself. Her feet still throbbed from the shift, but the adrenaline was masking the pain. She thought of Leo's face when he couldn't catch his breath. That image was the fuel that kept her moving. She walked up to the black SUV. The window rolled down. A man with a thick neck and an earpiece looked at her. Name? Sarah. Sarah Miller. The man spoke into his wrist. Package is here. He nodded at the metal door. Go inside. Keep walking until you see the light. Sarah swallowed hard. She pushed open the heavy steel door. Inside the warehouse was cavernous. It was filled with rows of shipping containers, stacked 3 high. The air was cold. In the center of the vast space, under a hanging bank of industrial lights, stood a folding table and 2 chairs. Ethan Sterling was sitting there. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular. He was reading a document, a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. He didn't look up as she approached. "You're 2 minutes early," he said. "If you're on time, you're late," Sarah replied, repeating a phrase her father used to say. Ethan looked up over the rim of his glasses. A flicker of amusement or perhaps respect crossed his face. "Sit." Sarah sat. The metal chair was cold. "Why am I here, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Is this about the service? Because if you're going to fire me, you could have just called the restaurant." Ethan placed the document down. "I don't care about the service, Sarah. The service was mediocre. The food was adequate. But you were interesting." "Interesting." "I tested you," Ethan said, leaning back. "I made ridiculous demands. I insulted your profession. I questioned your life choices. Most people would have crumbled. They would have cried, or they would have spit in my food. You did neither. You executed the task with precision, despite your obvious anger." He reached into a briefcase on the floor and pulled out a stack of papers. He slammed them onto the table. "This," he said, tapping the stack, "is the shipping manifest for my logistics division for the last quarter. We are losing money, significant amounts. My board says it's market fluctuation. My CFO says it's fuel costs. I think they are all incompetent or lying." He looked her dead in the eye. "You noticed the rind on a lemon slice in a dark restaurant. You noticed I was left-handed and placed the wine glass accordingly. You have an eye for detail that my Ivy League executives lack because they are too busy looking at the big picture to see the cracks in the foundation." Sarah stared at the papers. "You want me to look at your shipping logs?" "I want you to find the error," Ethan said. "You have 1 hour. If you find nothing, I will give you cab fare home, and you will never see me again. If you find the leak, I will write a check for your son's surgery tonight." Sarah's breath hitched. "How do you know about the surgery?" "I know everything, Sarah. I did a background check on you the moment you walked away from my table." Sarah Miller, 26, widowed. 1 son, Leo, age 5. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Surgery required the Fontan procedure. Cost approximately $150,000 out of pocket, with your deductible and network gaps. He pulled a checkbook from his pocket. He uncapped a fountain pen. 1 hour, he repeated. "The clock starts now." Sarah didn't argue. She didn't ask how he knew. She grabbed the stack of papers. It was a mess of numbers. Dates, container IDs, weights, contents, destinations. To anyone else it looked like gibberish. But Sarah had spent 5 years memorizing complex orders, splitting checks 10 ways for drunk patrons, and managing a household budget down to the last penny. She understood patterns. The warehouse was silent, except for the hum of the lights and the scratching of Ethan's pen as he worked on his own documents. Sarah's eyes scanned the pages. Container 405, electronics, weight 4 or 500 pounds, destination Hong Kong. She turned the page. Container 405, arrival Hong Kong, weight 4, 200 pounds. Weight discrepancy, she whispered. Common in shipping, Ethan said without looking up. Moisture loss packaging shifts. Move on. Sarah ignored him. She kept flipping. She saw the pattern again. Container 612, luxury textiles. Departure, weight 2,000 pounds. Arrival weight 850 pounds. It was always the high-value shipments, and it was always a loss of exactly 5 to 7%. Small enough to be written off as shrinkage or error, but consistent. She looked at the dates. Every shipment with a discrepancy was signed off by the same loading supervisor at the port of origin, a signature that looked like a jagged M. "Who is M?" Sarah asked. Ethan stopped writing. "M? Look at the dates," Sarah said, her voice gaining confidence. She spun the papers around and pointed. October 4th, shortage, signed by M. October the 12th, shortage, signed by M. November the 1st, shortage, signed by M. But look at the shipments in between. October 8th, signed by JR, no shortage. The weight is exact. She grabbed a calculator from the table. She hadn't even realized it was there, and punched in the numbers. The average loss on M shipments is 6.2%. It's consistent. It's not an accident. Someone is skimming off the top of the high-value containers before they are sealed, then falsifying the initial weight logs to make it look like they were lighter when they left. But the automatic scale at the crane creates a secondary record. She pointed to a column on the far right. The crane weight matches the heavy weight. The supervisor log matches the lightweight. The difference is being stolen before it gets on the ship. Ethan stared at the paper. He traced the line with his finger. He looked at the crane weight, then the supervisor log. His eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "Marcus," he whispered. "Marcus Thorne. My brother-in-law." The silence in the warehouse was deafening. Sarah had just accused the billionaire's family member of theft. She pulled her hand back, suddenly terrified. I could be wrong," she stammered. "I'm just a waitress. I don't know how shipping works." Ethan stood up. He walked around the table. He loomed over her, his shadow stretching long on the concrete floor. Sarah braced herself for him to yell, to tell her she was crazy. Instead, he reached out and picked up the checkbook. He wrote rapidly. He tore the check out with a sharp rip and held it out to her. Sarah took it. Her hands shook so hard, the paper rattled. "Pay to the order of a Sarah Miller. Amount $200,000. She gasped. "Mr. Sterling, this is I can't." "You just saved me $3 million a year," Ethan said, his voice flat. "Marcus has been skimming for 6 months. My auditors missed it because they were looking for financial transaction errors, not physical weight discrepancies. You saw it in 20 minutes. He leaned against the table, crossing his arms. "I have a proposition for you, Sarah." Sarah looked up from the check tears streaming down her face. "You've already done enough. This saves Leo's life." "This solves your problem for today," Ethan corrected. "But what about tomorrow? What about his recovery? What about his education? What about your future? You go back to Le Jardin and serve soup to ungrateful snobs for minimum wage." "I do what I have to do," she said. "Stop doing what you have to do and start doing what you were born to do," Ethan said intensely. "I need someone like you. Someone who isn't part of my world. Someone who isn't blinded by greed or loyalty to my family. I am surrounded by sharks, Sarah, and I need a remora, a cleaner." "A cleaner?" "I want to hire you. Officially, you will be my executive assistant. Unofficially, you will be my eyes. You will attend meetings, dinners, galas. You will watch. You will listen. And you will tell me what I miss. You will find the lemon rinds in my company." "I don't know anything about business," Sarah protested. "I can teach you business. I can't teach instinct." He held out his hand. "Salary is $250,000 a year. Full benefits. Private health care for your son. And you live on my estate in the guest wing, so you are available whenever I need you. but you quit the restaurant tonight, and you sign an NDA that says if you breathe a word of my private business to anyone, I will destroy you." Sarah looked at his hand. It was large, calloused, and steady. She looked at the check in her other hand. She thought of Jessica laughing at her. She thought of Henderson yelling. She thought of the cold bus ride home. She reached out and took Ethan's hand. His grip was iron. "I accept," she whispered. "Good," Ethan said, and for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Welcome to the Sterling Empire, Sarah. Try not to get eaten." The transition from a cramped one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs to the Sterling estate was like moving from a black-and-white movie into Technicolor. 2 days after the warehouse meeting, a moving truck arrived at Sarah's apartment. Movers packed her meager belongings in under an hour. A private ambulance, paid for by Sterling Industries, transported Leo to the best pediatric cardiac unit in the state to prepare for his surgery, which was now scheduled for the following week. Sarah stood in the foyer of the Sterling mansion. It was a sprawling, modern fortress of glass and stone overlooking the ocean. It was cold, beautiful, and intimidating. "Mrs. Miller," a stiff-looking butler said, bowing slightly. "Mr. Sterling is in the library. He requested your presence immediately upon arrival." "Thank you," Sarah said. She was wearing a new suit she had bought with a cash advance Ethan had authorized. It was navy blue, sharp and professional. She felt like an imposter in it. She walked through the house. The art on the walls was worth more than her entire lifetime earnings. But there were no photos, no family portraits. It was a house, not a home. She entered the library. Ethan was standing by the window talking on the phone. He held up a hand, signaling her to wait. "I don't care what the union says, Marcus. If the numbers don't add up, shut down the dock. We'll talk about your oversight later." He hung up the phone and turned to Sarah. His face was like a thundercloud. "You were right," he said without preamble. Marcus confessed. He claimed it was a gambling debt. He's been relieved of his duties. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "It must be hard. He's family." Ethan let out a short, bitter laugh. "Family is just a word for people who feel entitled to your money, Sarah. You'll learn that quickly here." He walked over to his desk and picked up a tablet. "Tonight is your first test in the field. There is a charity gala at the Museum of History. Everyone who matters in Seattle will be there. Investors, competitors, and the board of directors." "What do I have to do?" Sarah asked. "Survive," a female voice said from the doorway. Sarah turned. Standing in the entrance was a woman who looked like she had walked off the cover of Vogue. She was tall, blonde, and devastatingly beautiful. She wore a red dress that fit her like a second skin. Her eyes were green, but they held no warmth. "Hello, darling," the woman said, walking past Sarah as if she were a piece of furniture and kissing Ethan on the cheek. Ethan didn't kiss her back. He stiffened slightly. "Sarah, this is Veronica Vance, my fiancée." Sarah's stomach dropped. Fiancée. He hadn't mentioned a fiancé. "And you must be the new—" "Help," Veronica said, turning to look at Sarah with a look of pure disdain. She scanned Sarah from head to toe, lingering on the off-the-rack suit. "Quaint?" "Sarah is my new executive assistant," Ethan said firmly. "She will be accompanying us tonight." Veronica laughed. "Oh, Ethan, you can't be serious. Look at her. She looks like a school teacher. She'll be eaten alive by the sharks at the gala. Why don't you let me hire a professional? I know a wonderful girl from the agency who speaks Mandarin and knows which fork to use." Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. The old Sarah would have looked down. The waitress Sarah would have apologized. But she wasn't a waitress anymore. She was the woman who caught Marcus Thorne stealing $3 million. "I know which fork to use, Miss Vance," Sarah said, her voice calm. "I spent 5 years setting them. And unlike the people you know, I can tell you exactly who in the room is hungry and who is just pretending to eat." The room went silent. Veronica's smile vanished. She looked at Sarah with a newfound sharpness. "Feisty," Veronica said, her voice icy. "I give her a week." "She's staying," Ethan said, stepping between them. "Go get changed, Sarah. The stylist brought some options to your room. We leave in an hour." Sarah nodded and left the room, but she could feel Veronica's eyes drilling into her back. Up in her room, which was larger than her old apartment, Sarah found a rack of dresses. They were incredible. Silks, satins, designer labels. She chose a black gown. It was simple, elegant, and modest, with long sleeves and a high neck, but the back plunged low. It was sophisticated. Armor. She looked at herself in the mirror. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her hair was pulled up in a sleek bun. Her makeup was flawless. "For Leo," she whispered. The drive to the gala was tense. Ethan sat on one side of the limousine, Veronica on the other. Sarah sat on the jump seat facing them. "So Sarah," Veronica said, swirling her champagne. "Where did Ethan find you, Harvard Business School, Wharton?" "The service industry," Ethan answered for her. Veronica choked on her drink. "You hired a waitress to manage your affairs, Ethan. Have you lost your mind? The board will laugh you out of the room." "The board is currently too busy covering up their own incompetence to laugh at anyone," Ethan said. "Sarah sees things they don't." "We'll see," Veronica muttered. When they arrived at the gala, the flashbulbs were blinding. Sarah stepped out of the car, and for a moment, she panicked. The noise, the lights, the shouting reporters. Ethan's hand touched the small of her back. It was a gentle, guiding pressure. "Breathe," he whispered in her ear. "They are just people, and most of them are idiots." They entered the grand hall. It was filled with people holding champagne flutes wearing jewels that cost millions. "Go," Ethan said quietly. "Mingle. Listen. Tell me what you hear." Sarah separated from them. She took a glass of sparkling water, no lemon, and drifted through the crowd. She made herself invisible, a skill she had perfected as a server. She stood near groups of men in tuxedos, pretending to admire the exhibits while listening to their conversations. "Sterling stock is going to take a hit when the merger news breaks. I heard he's firing Thorne. Trouble in paradise. Veronica is pushing for the vote next month. She wants the chairmanship." Sarah froze. Veronica wants the chairmanship. But she was his fiancée. Sarah moved closer to a group of 3 men, standing near a dinosaur exhibit. She recognized one of them. It was Mr. Henderson, her old manager from Le Jardin. He was serving drinks from a tray. She turned away quickly, hoping he wouldn't see her, but she bumped right into a tall, heavy-set man with a red face. "Watch it," the man snapped. "I apologize," Sarah said. The man looked at her. "Wait a minute, I know you." Sarah's heart stopped. It was one of the regulars from the restaurant. Mr. Coburn, a real estate tycoon who was known for pinching the waitresses. "You're the girl from Le Jardin," Coburn said loudly. "The one with the sick kid. What are you doing here? Did you sneak in to beg for donations?" People nearby turned to look. Veronica was standing 10 feet away, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She had been waiting for this. I work here, Sarah said, lifting her chin. Work here? Coburn laughed, grabbing her arm. Come on, honey. Let's get you out before security comes. This isn't a place for the help. Let go of her, a deep voice boomed. Ethan appeared out of the crowd. He looked like a predator. Oh, Ethan, Coburn said, releasing Sarah. Just doing you a favor. Found a stray waitress crashing your party. She didn't crash the party, Ethan said, stepping next to Sarah and placing a possessive arm around her waist. She is my guest, and my advisor, and if you ever touch her again, Coburn, I will buy your building and evict you from your own penthouse. Coburn paled. I didn't know. Now you know, Ethan said. Get out of my sight. Coburn scurried away. The crowd murmured. Ethan Sterling, the Ice King, had just publicly defended a waitress. Veronica walked over her face a mask of fury. You just humiliated one of our biggest investors for her. He humiliated himself, Ethan said. He looked down at Sarah. Are you all right? Sarah looked up at him. Her heart was racing, but not from fear anymore. From something else. Something dangerous. I'm fine, she said, but I have information. Tell me. Veronica, Sarah said, looking the blonde woman dead in the eye. She's planning a vote next month. She wants to take the chairmanship from you. Veronica's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. You lying little gutter rat, Veronica hissed. Is it true? Ethan asked, his voice dropping to a terrifying octave. He turned to his fiancée. Is it true, Veronica? Veronica glared at Sarah with pure hatred. You think you can bring a stray dog into our house and have it bite me? Ethan, you have no idea what you've started. She stormed off. Ethan turned to Sarah. He looked impressed, and perhaps aroused. The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. You really do hear everything, he murmured. I told you, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. I know who is hungry. And Veronica. She's starving, Sarah said. She wants your empire, Ethan. And she's going to use your brother-in-law, Marcus, to get it. Ethan looked out over the crowd. Then we have a war to fight, Sarah. He took her hand, not as a boss, but as a partner. Are you ready? Sarah thought of Leo safe in the private hospital. She thought of the $0 tip. She thought of the life she left behind. She squeezed his hand back. I'm ready. For 3 weeks, Sarah lived in a dream. Leo's surgery was a complete success, and for the first time in his life, his cheeks had a rosy color. Sarah was thriving at Sterling Industries. She wasn't just an assistant. She was becoming Ethan's right hand. She sat in on negotiations, spotting bluffing CEOs by their nervous tics. She reorganized the filing systems, finding inefficiencies that saved the company thousands daily. And though neither of them said it aloud, she and Ethan were growing closer. Late nights at the office turned into shared takeout dinners, where they talked about books, philosophy, and Leo. Sarah saw the man behind the billionaire, lonely guarded but desperate for a real connection. But in the shadows, Veronica Vance was waiting. It was a Tuesday morning, the day of the board vote on the merger with Omnicorp, a deal that would cement Ethan's legacy. If the merger failed, the stock would tank, and the board would have grounds to remove him as CEO, paving the way for a new chair. Sarah walked into Ethan's office, carrying his coffee black, 2 sugars, no cream. She had learned he had a sweet tooth. 2 security guards were standing by her desk. Veronica was there too, holding a tablet, a look of mock sympathy on her face. Ethan was standing by the window, his back to the room. The air was so cold, it hurt to breathe. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah asked, her stomach twisting. "Is everything okay?" Ethan turned around. His eyes were no longer the warm steel they had become. They were ice again. Dark, unforgiving ice. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" he asked quietly. "Find out what?" Sarah put the coffee down, her hands trembling. "Don't play innocent, Sarah," Veronica purred, stepping forward. "We know about the transfer, the files you sent to Omnicorp last night, the merger details, the bid price, everything." Sarah's mouth fell open. "What, I didn't send anything. I don't even have access to the Omnicorp server. You used my login," Ethan said, his voice cracking with suppressed rage. "Logged in from your IP address in the guest wing. Sent to a secure Dropbox at 3:00 a.m. He threw a stack of photos onto the desk. They were grainy pictures of Sarah meeting a man in a park. "Who is this?" Ethan demanded. "The Omnicorp rep." Sarah looked at the photo. That's my cousin Mike. He was returning a car seat I lent him." "A likely story," Veronica sneered. "Just like the sick child story you used to wiggle your way into this house. You're a grifter, Sarah. We checked your bank account. $50,000 was wired to you this morning from an offshore shell company." "No," Sarah screamed, tears welling up. "I didn't do this. You have to believe me. Ethan, Veronica is setting me up. She wants the chairmanship. Enough." Ethan slammed his hand on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He looked at Sarah, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. "I trusted you. I let you into my home. I let you near my business. I let you—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I thought you were different. I thought you were the one honest person in a city of liars. But you're the worst of them all, because you made me care." "Ethan, please," Sarah begged, reaching out. "Don't touch me." He recoiled. "You're fired. Security will escort you off the premises immediately. You have 1 hour to pack your things. If you're not gone, I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage." "What about Leo?" Sarah whispered. "He's still recovering. The insurance." "You should have thought about that before you sold me out," Ethan said coldly. He turned his back to her again. "Get her out of here." The security guards grabbed Sarah's arms. As they dragged her out, she saw Veronica standing behind Ethan. Veronica winked at her. A slow, deliberate wink. Sarah was thrown out of the mansion gates with 2 suitcases. It started to rain. She stood on the curb, sobbing, humiliated and terrified. She had lost the job. She had lost the man she was falling in love with. And soon she would lose the insurance, keeping her son alive. She had hit rock bottom before. But this time the fall was from a penthouse. Sarah spent the night in a cheap motel near the hospital. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face, the look of betrayal. $50,000 wired to my account, my IP address. She knew she hadn't done it, which meant Veronica had hacked the system. Veronica was smart, but she was arrogant. She would have covered her digital tracks, but Sarah remembered something Ethan had told her in the warehouse that first night. "My auditors missed it because they were looking for financial transaction errors, not physical weight discrepancies." Veronica relied on digital manipulation, but physical evidence. That was harder to fake. Sarah sat up in bed. The board vote was today at 2:00 p.m. She looked at the clock. 9:00 a.m. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number she had memorized from the shipping logs. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Is this JR, The loading supervisor at Pier 59. Yeah, who's asking? My name is Sarah Miller. I used to work for Mr. Sterling. I need you to let me into the archives. Now. I heard you got fired, lady. I can't let you in. JR, listen to me. Sarah said, her voice shaking but fierce. I know about the extra crates you log on the side to keep the union off your back. I know you're a good man who just wants to keep his guys employed. If Veronica Vance takes over today, she's going to automate the entire dock. You'll all be fired by Christmas. I'm the only one who can stop her. There was a long silence on the other end. Meet me at the back gate in 20 minutes, JR said. Sarah spent the last of her cash on a taxi. When she got to the warehouse, JR let her in. He looked tired. The archives are in the basement, he said. Old school. Paper. We only digitize what we send to HQ. Sarah ran down the metal stairs. The basement smelled of mold and dust. Rows of filing cabinets stretched out before her. She needed to find the visitor log for the mansion server room. The digital logs said Sarah had logged in at 3:00 a.m. from the guest wing. But the physical security system at the mansion, the backup system installed in the basement that ran on a closed circuit, wasn't connected to the internet. It had a hard drive that recorded keycard swipes, but she couldn't get to the mansion. Think. She paced the room. Veronica framed her for sending files to Omnicorp. The transfer happened at 3:00 a.m. Sarah started pulling files related to Veronica's expense reports. Ethan had given her access to everything weeks ago, and Sarah had made photocopies of suspicious documents to study later, a habit from her days of couponing. She still had her notebook in her purse. She flipped through the pages. Veronica claimed she was in New York last week. But here, a receipt for a private courier service in Seattle on the same day. Destination Omnicorp headquarters. Sender, Vi, Vance. Contents hard drive. Sarah froze. Veronica hadn't sent the files digitally at all. She had physically mailed a hard drive weeks ago to set up the deal, then faked the digital transfer last night to frame Sarah. But Bra needed proof that Veronica was the one who authorized the wire transfer to Sarah's account. She looked at the bank transfer document. The security guard had given her a copy was in her termination papers. The authorizing signature was digital. E. Sterling. But the timestamp on the authorization was 4:15 a.m. Sarah looked at the warehouse shipping logs on the desk. At 4:15 a.m. this morning, the system showed a login from the Sterling yacht, which was docked in the harbor. Ethan was in bed at 4:15 a.m. Sarah knew because she had seen his light go out at midnight from her window. Veronica, however, had been staying on the yacht while her townhouse was being renovated. Sarah grabbed the papers. She had the courier receipt proving Veronica sent data to Omnicorp. She had the location data proving the bank transfer came from the yacht. It was circumstantial, but it was enough to create doubt. She looked at her watch. 1:15 p.m. The vote started in 45 minutes. JR, I need a ride, Sarah said, running up the stairs. To where? Sterling Tower, and drive fast. The boardroom of Sterling Industries was a glass box in the sky. 12 men and women in suits sat around a mahogany table. Ethan sat at the head, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His face was grey. Veronica sat to his right, radiant in a white power suit. The breach of security by Mr. Sterling's former assistant has compromised the Omnicorp merger, Veronica said smoothly. Omnicorp has pulled out because our internal data is no longer secure. The stock has dropped 12% this morning. The board members murmured anxiously. This shows a lack of judgment on the CEO's part. Veronica continued, placing a hand on the table. Ethan is brilliant, but he is emotionally compromised. He let a con artist into our inner circle. We need stability. We need leadership that isn't distracted by charity cases. She looked at Ethan. I move for a vote of no confidence in Ethan Sterling as CEO, and I put myself forward as interim chairwoman to salvage the company. Seconded, said Mr. Coburn, the man Sarah had embarrassed at the gala. Ethan, the lead director asked, do you have anything to say? Ethan looked up. He looked defeated. He had lost the woman he trusted, and now he was losing his life's work. I take full responsibility, he rasped. Very well, the director said. All in favor of removing Ethan Sterling. Hands started to go up. 1, 2, 3. Veronica raised hers high, a triumphant smile on her lips. Bang! The double doors to the boardroom flew open. I object, Sarah yelled, bursting into the room. Her hair was frizzy from the rain. Her clothes were rumpled, and she was out of breath. 2 security guards were chasing her. Get her out, Veronica shrieked, standing up. She's a criminal. I'm not the criminal, Sarah shouted, dodging a guard. She threw the stack of papers onto the mahogany table. They slid across the polished surface and stopped right in front of Ethan. Sarah. Ethan stood up, confused. What are you doing? Look at the papers, Ethan. Sarah pleaded, ignoring the guard gripping her arm. The courier receipt Veronica sent the hard drive to Omnicorp 2 weeks ago. She didn't use the network last night. She used a physical courier, so it wouldn't be flagged by IT. Ethan looked down. He saw the receipt. Sender V. Vance. And the wire transfer, Sarah yelled as the guard started to drag her backward. The money sent to my account, authorized at 4:15 a.m. Look at the IP location. It came from the Sea Star, the yacht. Who is sleeping on the yacht, Ethan? You were in the mansion. I was in the guest wing. Ethan froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He looked at the papers. He looked at the timestamp. Wait, Ethan commanded the guards. His voice was the voice of the Ice King again. Let her go. The guards released Sarah. She rubbed her arm, panting. Ethan picked up the papers. He read them slowly. Then he turned to Veronica. Veronica was pale. It's a forgery, she stammered. She forged it. She's desperate. This courier receipt has a tracking number, Ethan said quietly. He pulled out his phone and typed it in. Delivered to Omnicorp Legal Department. Signed for by John Smith, Head of Acquisitions. He looked up. The room was deadly silent. You tanked the merger, Ethan said, his voice rising. You sold our secrets. You framed Sarah. You stole $50,000 of company money to make it look like a bribe. I did it for us, Veronica screamed, her mask slipping. You were going soft, Ethan. You were listening to her, a waitress. You were going to ruin the company with your sentimental decisions. I had to save it. You didn't save it, Ethan said, walking over to her. You just committed federal fraud. And I believe Mr. Coburn just seconded a motion led by a felon. Is that correct, Coburn? Coburn turned bright red. I withdraw my second. I had no idea. Ethan pointed to the door. Get out, Veronica. The police are waiting in the lobby. I called them the moment Sarah mentioned the yacht. I always knew you were ambitious, but I never thought you were stupid. Veronica looked around the room. No one would meet her eyes. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, shoving Sarah as she passed. The room was silent again. Ethan turned to the board. The motion is dead. The merger is dead. But I have a new plan to restructure, starting with the removal of everyone who voted against me today. He looked at the board members who had raised their hands. They looked terrified. Meeting adjourned, Ethan said. The directors scrambled out of the room like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Finally, it was just Ethan and Sarah. Sarah stood by the door, clutching her purse. I should go. I just wanted to clear my name. Sarah, wait. Ethan walked around the table. He stopped in front of her. He looked tired, but for the first time in days his eyes were warm. You came back, he said, after I fired you, after I humiliated you, after I threw you out in the rain. You came back to save me. I didn't do it for you, Sarah said, her voice trembling. I did it because it was the truth, and because no one deserves to be betrayed by the people they trust. Ethan flinched. I am so sorry, Sarah. I was a fool. I let my past, my fear of being used, blind me to the person standing right in front of me. He reached into his pocket. Sarah flinched, expecting him to pull out a checkbook again to pay her off. Instead, he pulled out the crumpled receipt from Le Jardin, the one with the $0 tip. I kept this, he said. Do you know why I left 0? Sarah shook her head. Because a tip is for a servant, Ethan said. And I realized that night that you weren't a servant. You were an equal. I didn't want to pay you for your service. I wanted to offer you a partnership. I didn't know how to ask without testing you first. He took a step closer. I don't want an executive assistant, Sarah. I want a partner, a real one. I want you to be the COO of Sterling Industries. I need someone who checks the weight of the shipping containers. Someone who notices the lemon rind. Someone who isn't afraid to burst into a boardroom to do what is right. Sarah stared at him. COO Ethan. I don't have a degree. You have something better, Ethan said, taking her hand. You have integrity. And you have my heart. If you'll have it. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. What about the $0 tip? She joked through her tears. You still owe me 18%. Ethan smiled a genuine, dazzling smile. I think I can do better than 18%. How about 50% of everything? He kissed her then. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was desperate and real, a promise sealed not with a contract, but with a touch. And that is the story of how Sarah Miller turned a humiliating $0 tip into a multi-million-dollar empire. She proved that your value isn't defined by the apron you wear or the car you drive, but by your integrity, your intelligence, and your resilience. Ethan learned that trust is the most expensive currency in the world, and once broken, it must be earned back with action, not just words. Today, Sarah and Ethan run Sterling Industries together, and they created a foundation in Leo's name that pays for surgeries for children who can't afford them, ensuring no parent ever has to choose between rent and their child's life. If this story touched your heart, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never give up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more incredible stories of karma and redemption. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.